Okay, over to you, William.
Okay, well, yeah, well, welcome everybody to, I suppose, our first webinar of 2026. As chairman of I suppose we're growing we're growing nicely. We've just had our second AGM. We have just over 40 paid up members, about 200 members on our WhatsApp group, and about 350 Facebook followers. So, from pretty humble beginnings 2 years ago, we've made significant progress. And I'd like to thank my fellow steering group members for all the help and support. Um, Tonight, I suppose we're very lucky to be joined by Kelvin Glover. I'd really like to thank Kelvin for coming on to tell us about shedding sheep in New Zealand. Um, Kelvin, as many of you will have noticed, is a frequent contributor to our WhatsApp group, and yeah, it's always interesting and thought provoking, and sometimes a little bit mischievous. Um, so, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Josh Lamb, who's running the technical side of this. Josh is on our steering group and a vital cog in the wheel. Um, and obviously, I'd also like to thank Stephen Johnston for initially floating this idea and getting the contact with Kelvin up and running. So Kelvin is going to run through now for 30 or 40 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity to answer or to ask some questions through the chat room. Over to you, Josh. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for joining. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, if you just drop them in the chat box, we may not get to all the questions. Um, yeah, depending on time constraints, but it should be pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to hand over to Kelvin now, and you can take it away, Kelvin.
Right, evening everyone. What I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to run through, and it's today here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am, a little bit of sheep farming history in New Zealand, just in case you're not up to speed on what we do, how we do things over here. A little bit about the history of the shedders, and then a little bit about the shedding breeds just very quickly, going into focusing on what's happened in the last 5 years with the shedding industry, the genetics, the imports that have happened in this last 5 years. Right, who am I? Well, you know, I'm Kelvin. I was born on a dry stock farm here in New Zealand. We had 200 acres at a place called Hodderville. It was a farm that was developed by my granddad. He cut it out of bush. It had been a dairy farm. And this is back when you could have sort of 12 to 20 cows and make a living. During my family's ownership, we had a piggery. So we had breeding sows. We had Drysdale ewes, and we had a few beef cattle. Because it was only 200 acres, profitability for sheep farming was going out the window, and we actually started to transfer into milking goats. Now I'm not the tallest guy. I'm only 5'4", and I am the tallest of my family. So it was often joked that we milked goats because we couldn't reach cows. Now, back as I was growing up, my parents actually wanted me to be an accountant. I left the farm. I became a mechanic. I bought a business. Pretty much you spend all the time in the office, so you become an accountant. It would have been far easier just to become an accountant. And on returning to the family farm, and we were the largest dairy goat operation in New Zealand for a time, and we did performance recording with our pigs, and we did performance recording with our goats. That farm was sold, and my parents bought what was to be their retirement block. It was about 18 years ago. And I've come back to the farm a little bit after that. and we've got a 400-acre dairy grazing block. That's across the road from where I am now. And I'm sitting on my massive sheep station of 12 acres. And I had 50 ewes on the main farm when they had the goats as well. They cleaned up a few of those paddocks around the goats. And I always had an interest in sheep. And I've tried to prompt my parents into buying a bigger farm or as a family unit. And we're still not, that's not out of the question. My brother is quite a bit older than me, so that's a consideration. But I saw an interest in shedders, and I don't claim to be the expert. But what I did with my YouTube channel is I went and found the experts. So people who knew far more than me, and a lot of my knowledge is gathered from talking and being around and gaining respect within the industry and the shedding industry. So I can communicate with most of the breeders here in New Zealand. They know who I am, they know what I'm about, and they don't mind me turning up with a camera. As and internationally, I've got Tim, who I just did a video with, and that's gaining some views. Right, right. I'm going to attempt to. Josh, can you see the New Zealand screen?
I can indeed. Looking good.
Right, so there's New Zealand. So for those of you that don't really know New Zealand, we have the North Island. It's the one in the north of the map, and then we have the South Island, and we have this little one down the bottom, Stewart Island. There's some other islands, of course, and we were very creative in our naming. Some people think it looks like Italy. Well, that's a much skinnier leg than New Zealand, and ours is a farmer's leg, and of course is broken. Now, we tend to farm outside, and these things, the New Zealand Romney, hopefully there's a Romney on the screen. That's a highly productive sheep. It's had 100 odd years of breeding to make it a highly productive sheep. And they make up 50% of our farming, of our sheep farm population in New Zealand. And hopefully we got that fella there. That's a Coopworth. It's a border Leicester across a Romney, so it's a Romney composite. So that's 20% of our farming sheep farm population. That means that pretty much 70% is made up by a Romney composite type animal, leaving 30% for the rest. So that's your blackface, your terminals, your Texels, Corriedales, and the shedders in that last 30%. The last estimate I heard was in the single digits. I would suggest in the shedding population with its current climb, or with a shedding component, is probably still in that single digits or just into the low teens, 11, 12. It's not a big population at this point in time. And of course, there's merinos in that 30% as well. As per a lot of the world, wool was our biggest income. And a lot of people, with the farming populations, with wool post-war, that was the income. Our sheep flock was still growing through the 70s, and it didn't peak until 1982. Now, if you ask the world how we farm sheep, that's the picturesque New Zealand sheep farm. Lovely mountain in the back, sheep, green grass, lovely. The reality is sheep farming has been pushed into the marginals. So this is actually Peter Foss's farm. It's a bit steep to run cows all the time. This sort of land now is sought after by the pine tree guys. So the reality of sheep farming is we've been pushed back, we've been forced back into the more marginal land. Or this is Grant Keen's property, that's his ewe lambs. That's up on his hills. So they're not very big hills in Southland. In fact, most of Southland is actually kind of more flat. And those guys are competing with dairy cows. So we've been pushed back. Now, 70s sheep population still growing. So it's really important to note going forward. You'll find out why that's important. But we peaked in the 1982 around 70 million sheep. And today, I'll see if I can find it. I didn't put this one in order, unfortunately. Just going to flip through here. Today, around about, we're talking about 23 million sheep in New Zealand. And I should have mentioned, Kiwis do something funny with our language. So if I say something a bit weird, it's because I'm speaking Kiwi. You'll see this total here, hoggets. Well, I've got some 8-month, oh no, they're only about 6-month-old ewe lambs out in my paddock, and I could call them my ewe hoggets. So even though hoggets are normally a year old, and that's the case when they go to the works, we also call them hoggets when they're still lambs. So this total was actually often lambs, but we've got a ewe flock of about 14 million ewes, and we're killing about 20 million animals per year, which works out about a 1.3 lambing percentage. But of course, we've got some carryover sheep, so some of those hoggets are going into that the kill rate. Now, something else that Kiwis is really weird that we do is we've always done a ratio of people population to sheep population. So in the 80s, 22 to 1. Now it's closer to 4.5 to 1. And it's kind of a weird way of doing a ratio, a weird way of doing a measurement. That's because if you factor the adult males and you factor the adult female sheep, you can tell how many girlfriends we've got. Oh, wait, no, that's the Australians. And there's no Australians in here, so we're okay. Right, so just like the rest of the world, we have been suffering from. Have you still got me there?
Yep.
You got me, Josh? Good.
All good.
We've been suffering just like the rest of the world with and I can blame pine trees, I can blame cows, I can blame all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, it's dollars. If the land isn't profitable, we're going to run something else on it. And it's been the big case. I remember in the 80s, my dad would go to the sale and he was buying ewes for $5, and then he was buying ewes for $2 and buying them for $1, and we were actually sharing them. There was enough money still. There's just a little bit of the wool. We'd peel their pelts off them, so we'd get something for the skin, for the hide, and then we were cooking them to feed our pigs with them because they were so cheap. Good ones. We had a farm forestry block, and we were just running these ewes, and we could get a $60 lamb out of a $1 ewe. We got a pretty good return. But that wasn't the case on larger scale. We were able to do it because we had the pigs and we had the goats propping up other things. Right. Moving forward, the history of the shedders into New Zealand. Now, remember I said the sheep population was growing in the 70s still. And the first recorded or known or acknowledged import of some shedders into New Zealand came out of Australia. It was 4 ewes, and these were a composite ewe. They were a Wiltshire horn across a Poll Dorset ewe to some, I'm not sure of the exact percentage of each. Known in Australia as a Wilty Poll. Let's see if I can grab, just wait, have we got the right picture? Have I got a picture there, Josh?
Not just yet. It's starting out.
What have I got?
Got a Romney.
Oh, I've got a Romney. Fantastic. That's still got a Romney up there. Let me find. Oh, gone the wrong way. Just wait a moment. Have you got a picture of a ram sniffing a bum?
No, just New Zealand at the minute.
Oh, just wait a minute. We'll just stop there. I'll just come back here. Josh, we'll just grab it again. What have we got there, Josh?
We've got the folder of the photos.
Ah, right. What about now? Have you got a ram sniffing a bum?
I can see it on a as a thumbnail. You double
No,
click
well, we'll
that.
go. We'll get rid of that. Don't worry. We'll just get rid of that.
Go.
Have you got me back? There we go. So the first ones that came in were 4 polled ewes, and we have a 1 horned ram came into New Zealand, and that was the basis of our shedding flock in New Zealand, and that doesn't give us a big genetic base. So in the early days, lots of grading up, lots of crossing with other stuff. So we were producing quite a mongrel. There would have been some later on imports of rams, but that initial import is where our basis came from. That's in the 70s. So, wool was still of value, whilst relative income had reduced from pre-war, but that was quite forward thinking. And you, of course, had the same thing over that side of the world where there were some forward thinkers who saw that it wasn't just wool, there was also time input. There was a difference, was something to consider. So those initial sheep became the basis, and they were purchased by the Morrison family in 1982. And I really tried hard to find some cards and some advertising which I've seen online for the Wiltshire Meat Company. So those initial animals, the concept was actually to produce a very lean lamb, to go away from the fat lamb. Of course, nutritionists started blaming animal fats for what sugar was doing to humans, and they wanted a leaner product. So they were heading for that lean Wiltshire. They had later on, when it was sold to Woolworths, that the Wiltshire Meat Company sold to Woolworths and was rebranded as Tenderloin. And they had the whole advertising thing with the Wiltshire brand across to produce a terminal lamb. Now, that initial flock and the genetics is still claimed to be owned by a member of the Morrison family. Dad has moved on from farming and passed it on to his sons. The sons have different farming aspirations, have got their own farms. Those genetics still exist in their 4 flocks as such. They've got composite and Wiltshire flocks, and that first original flock is claimed by Richard Morrison of the Gullies. So that flock number, the recorded flock number, and that is his claim, and it hasn't been disputed by anyone that I've talked to yet. And at the same time, or through the last 30 years, there's been another quite a big player, which is David Arvidson. And I couldn't work out where his sheep came from. And I was wondering if it's a second import or something. So I did do some digging. And the original importer of the Wiltshires would not sell both males and females to anyone. He would split them. You could buy female stock, you could buy male stock, you couldn't buy both. And so the person that David purchased from established a flock in the top of the North Island. And he rung up, he tried to buy stock, was denied. So a little bit of send this man down to buy some females and send this mate down to buy some males. And I'm sure it still happens. I know it still happens today. And a flock was developed, and David has been breeding those same sheep for 30 odd years now. Early 90s, so it's 35 odd years, and a lot of line breeding. Now, the breeds, primarily we're made up of, and I call them the New Zealand Wiltshire. Of course, you guys have got Wiltshires, they got the horns. Ours are a polled animal. In Australia, they're called a wilty pole. But people claim pure Wiltshire. There's been multiple blends and upgrading of animals, upbreeding happening over the years, so they're quite varied in what you get. So we've also got the Damara, we got the Dorper that hobble around our paddocks here. Though, of course, people are working on them. They're getting better structure. The Australians seem to have nailed the Dorper. They're lambing them 3 times in 2 years. But the rest of the world, we just can't seem to get the Dorper right yet. And whether it's going to be worth our time to do so. Moving more recently, 2022, Xlana, 2023-ish, 2022 born embryos for the EasyCares. And we rebranded them. So the big importer was Wairere. Some of the contributors to those flocks are sitting in this room tonight. And rebranded the Nudie. Don't go online and say, I can send you a Nudie photo, because you get a ban from those pages. Yeah. Shedding Texels. I've got a half shedding Texel in my flock. The New Zealand Texels, we've sorted out the poor lambing and all those other things that go along with the Texels are from the UK. And my ram's half UK Texel. But he didn't have any problems lambing, and he's half New Zealand Wiltshire, a beautiful animal. But we lose a little bit of the shedding, even in shedding Texels yet. Australian Whites. A couple of people have, more than a couple, quite a few people have done that. One very large breeder, Murray, Kahu Genetics. I think he probably just about had the Australian White, but he'd crossed it with the New Zealand Wiltshire. He was on the right track, and he's decided to move away and just leave a little bit of that in there. But what we're seeing is the Australian White as a sheep in its own is a piece of crap here in New Zealand. But when blended with other things as a part of the mix, they can actually contribute something. Some people see it's as a foot problem, but some people are still producing rams that have good genetic merit with a little bit of Australian White. Sheepmaster, still working on that. Ultra White, we're not seeing a lot of them yet. There's a few around. Australian Nudie, or low footprint Nudie. One of those sires has made a little bit of an influence in New Zealand. And I talked to a farm the other day that were putting 300 straws into their sheep each year for a couple of years. And they said they look just like a Wiltshire. And then we've got meat masters, which are not imported. We've bred them here. Has to have a Damara input. And so there's a few guys that have been breeding a sheep with very different genetic makeup to be an outcross to the Wiltshire. And I think that's fantastic. And one thing that I'm often asked is, do we have Catardans? The big long lists of import requirements, and you've got to tick all the boxes. We've got a few more boxes to tick, and no one's taken the time to tick those last few boxes. So no Catardans here. Right. Moving forward, so from the 80s, those initial flocks, those initial imports, what happened with the shedding industry, and why do we think that in the last 5 years we've had this massive explosion? Well, what actually been happening is it's been happening in the background. There's been huge numbers of farmers that have had a little shedding trial. Some have made mistakes. Some won't touch them again as a result. But a lot of them have had them in the back, or we've had little pockets where one farmer would get a few. Then the next farmer would go, "Hey, how are you getting on with them? I'm shearing. You're going to the beach in summer. We're doing flies. You're hardly touching anything. You're not even docking yours." And so we've seen pockets of shedders move up these remote places in New Zealand, but the industry actually has hammered or has immensely teased shedding farmers. It's schoolyard type behavior. But even though farmers who weren't making money on wool and won't give up that romance of wool, I'm wearing wool myself, and actually I see more shedding farmers wearing wool than wool farmers wearing wool. They're wearing, the plastics and the oil-based products. So a lot of the shedders were hidden from sight. I sat down and I talked to a guy, an older guy. He'd had shedders for 10 years, and this was one of the first e-sheep sales I went to. And he said he's running lambs off mum before Christmas, 19 kilos, which is about our average. And he was happy as, and had been doing it for a long time. And the more I talked to people, the more I found those stories, but they were hidden from sight. They were not mainstream. And then so when we look at the last 5 years, suddenly it seems like there's a lot of shedders around, but they've been there hidden away. We've had some massive ewe fairs. So female only is the idea. There's often a couple of rams from ram breeders have got a couple left over, those tail-end rams that probably shouldn't be at the sale. But the Tikawiti sale, a name that would be totally unfamiliar to you guys unless you've watched my videos. But 5,000 shedders, female shedders turn up. The top two-tooths run into the ring. Beautiful. Actually, there was one year that were capital stock. The woman's husband unfortunately passed away, farm sold. 500 in the $500 mark, which is, and I'm glad, Stephen, I'm glad you said euros, because you just halve it. So 250 euros for a two-tooth ewe. And aged ewes, just annual draft ewes, $360. So you halve $150 to $180. 150 euros. The top ewe lambs, they were beautiful line of ewe lambs, and I guessed the pen, 400 New Zealand dollars, so 200 euros for top lambs. But what we've seen there is we've also seen bottom end ewe lambs that probably shouldn't go into the sale. And because there's been such demand for shedding female replacements, they were going into breeding operations. And I know some of those tail-end ewe lambs, out of your hoggets, so they're genetically good. And I know some are multiples, so again, or late born, so that genetically they're good, but there was some crap. And that's one of the issues that's hurt. I was going to have issues separate, but that's one of the issues that actually hurt our industry. In subsequent years, so last year, the demand for female stock was down. And I found that was awesome, because what we actually had was there were store buyers coming along picking off those tail end lambs, and farmers that had poorer quality lambs got poorer returns, which is actually, I see, as good for the industry, because they won't be coming to the sale this year because they didn't get the returns, and hopefully those ewe lambs will be finished and go to the works, so we can focus on really good, strong breeding stock. There was another sale at Gisborne. So we just sold 5,000 breeding ewes or female stock at Tikawiti, and up at Gisborne they put through 3,000 breeding animals. And then the other disadvantage of that particular sale is they had pens of ram lambs. Farmers had kept ram lambs, and there were unrecorded, unknown ram lambs in the sale for $500, and that isn't ideal for our industry. Right now, we've also got another little ewe fair that started, which is in Wairarapa. They really focus on high quality. One stud breeder actually he's got a commercial line, but they're bringing along good animals. another breeder with buying good rams, bring along good female stock, and it's rewarded in its prices. Ewe lambs, probably a bit more normal. Um, Top ewe lambs going sort of 200 to 250, so halve that in euros. But a lot of ewe lambs are $20 or $30 over store pricing. So, and again, that is good for our industry. Right, in the importing of genetics, and I might get in trouble here, Tim. The Xlana, I believe they were meant to come in 21. They were actually in 22. There may have been a spillage of the lamb batter tank. May have had issues. Something's happened, but that initial import didn't happen as we'd like. And 2022 we got Xlana. Great things about Xlana that they look like a Wiltshire, so they blend in. They're genetically variant enough that they do give us some hybrid vigor. And they were used across a lot of flocks in the same breeding season at the same breeding time. So what we got is we've got this massive amount of linkage for those Xlana sires, three main sires usually, or a couple of others, and we've had some since. Some people have kept some in the tank, so they've been used some different future years as well. So that's been really good for us. And another thing, there's a perception within the industry, and this is something that's really hard to get through to farmers. If they find that Wiltshires aren't good enough, Xlana is a different name, so they'll buy almost the same sheep with a different name. And are they better? I don't think the Xlana are substantially better than the best of our Wiltshires, but as part of our New Zealand blend, they've been advantageous to us. And we've seen rams from that. The top Xlana, part Xlana ram was sold last year. He went for 24,500, which I think may be a record for a shearing ram at auction here in New Zealand. So 12,000 euros. The other big import, of course, Stephen, was you contributed, was the Wairere nudies. And one of those EasyCare rams has ended up at another flock, ND200. I call him like a panda. He's quite stout, wide. He's bred very well and features very well in the EasyCare records. But one big problem that we've had with the EasyCare is they didn't have the semen used or the genetic material. And of course, a lot of those were embryos, but they haven't been spread around multiple flocks. So we can see particular rams that were used in CPT or used across flock. They very quickly went to the top of the leaderboard in our New Zealand recording system, which is Improve. It's managed. We have Beef and Lamb here in New Zealand Industry Board, and they are paid for with a small fee for every lamb that's killed, and they're levy based. They have a subsequent company, Sheep Improvement Limited, and they run Improve, which is the program. They're wanting us to use the word Improve when we talk about our sheep recording system. And so that's been a disadvantage with the EasyCare. We have had other imports since. There's a company down the South Island that bought in some embryos, and we've got Peter Foss at Ipirua who's bought some in, and he's just sold some of those as tudors. Now, Wairere are a absolutely marketing genius, and they were selling ram hoggets. And again, here's that hogget problem. They were born 2022. They were born September 2022, and they're sold end of February, beginning of March 2023. So lamb effectively, but we market it as hoggets. And they've got some astronomical prices. We're talking $10,000, $12,000 for the top of those animals. Average price of like 5,500 New Zealand dollars. So 2,700 odd euros for ram lambs. And continued buyers coming back. I sat at that auction last year, and there was still, I think there was a $13,000 one to one man, and their buyers have really thrived on those animals. But in the records and improve, they haven't really come up greatly against their competition within the system. And of course, we're encouraged not to do between flock comparison if there's not linkage. And so that really makes it hard to say whether they're better or worse. And certainly the people that I know, and certainly Murray, who's had ND200, he's loved those animals, and they've done very, very well and sold very, very well for him. The choosing of genetics, the ex-Lana import was submitted by Sheep Improvement Group in the UK. So they chose those rams and they put them forward. A mover of the genetics, and that first lot came through from ex-Lana directly, but also Ian McDougall's been having playing a role, and most of you who are breeding sheep, you're likely to know Ian. And he's again offering genetics, overseas genetics in New Zealand at the moment. We've also, of course, had the shedding Texels and the Australian stuff coming in, but it's hard for them to feature when they're not getting enough volume for improve to really work. We want to see 30 offspring from the ram to really get good data out of them. So, and compared to the Romney, the shedding sheep are still struggling, but because we haven't had linkage. So as we're going through, I did have a photo. We've got some wool breeders that are buying shedding sheep to pull the wool off their bums, pull the wool off their bellies. So as that happens more, we will get better linkage with the shedding animals in New Zealand. We're also seeing this last year. We've seen a lot more in the last 5 years. We've seen a lot more breeders come into the scene, and that's allowed greater genetic variance, and also it's allowed top ram breeders to buy top rams. You talk to any breeder who certainly pre 2015, they really struggled to find rams. And, that initial Morrison import filtered out to the South Island, produced the Gree and the Sheen, and there's Willow Glen. The Gree and the Sheen are now Enfield Genetics. They've come into that flock and been purchased. Willow Glen, there's still a relationship there, but we're seeing those animals going around. And I was gifted a ram by David Arvidsson recently, and I got a Sheen, I got a Morrison, I got a whole lot of animals, Arvidsson, all within that one animal. And that's how close our genetic makeup of our flock has been. And that's been a real struggle. So these outside genetics have really helped us boost that genetic variance. All right. I think probably what I'm going to end up on, I've got a couple of topics here. I've got, in the last 5 years, we've also seen a research flock started in Northland. And that's at Kapiro. Pamu is owned by the government, which owns Focus Genetics. And they've been doing a study primarily on heat tolerance, but also there is a goal to produce commercial rams for sale, even if it is within their own flock. They've committed about 60,000 ewes to have some shedding genetics within the Pamu flock. And the goal was, I believe, is to take rams from the Focus flock. And Focus have been responsible for a lot of Romneys, and a lot of Texels, and a lot of composites. You've got the Highlanders over there. If you've heard of Highlanders, we've heard of the Primeras. They've come through Pamu, through Focus, which is a government operation. And another study that we've had is the Sheep of the Future. Is the Massey University. Massey University took a Gaudi's Romney, we'll just call it a Romney, highly productive, highly fertile, They used Morrison rams, shedding rams across some of them, and they've run a control group as well. Hoggets out of hoggets out of hoggets out of hoggets, or mated ewe lambs out of hoggets. And what they've come with, the deciding factor right now, is that they have had zero loss in production from their shedding animals. The win is you don't have to deal with wool, but zero loss of production. And I'm going to put the caveat on there that by using good genetics. If you're using good genetics, no loss in production. And we'll go on to the issues that we've faced in the industry. And one of the problems we've faced is in the early days, a farmer bought some ram lambs from that guy up the road who had some behind his wool shed that weren't very good. Might have been fed very well, so they looked good, but they didn't perform. So we've got this perception that shedders don't grow. It's not the case when you're using good genetics. It may have been the case with poor genetics, but now we've proven if you use good genetics, they grow like crazy. And that's led on a little bit to some farmers switching over to shedders and finding they run their lambs to the store, to the sale, and they're getting a reduced return because a lot of the store buyers won't buy shedding lambs. Though I've sat down and I've talked to a couple who won't talk to me on camera, of course, because they go, well, this is fantastic because I can go to the sale, I can buy a shedding lamb for $10 or $15 less. I can put them on the same ground as my woolly sheep. They don't have to shear them. They can put them to the works 2 kilos lighter, but still yield the same result. So he said they're winning it all the way. They're winning all the way to the bank. But of course, they don't want to say that on camera because they'd let other store breeders find out that they're actually missing out. And if they started trying with the genetics we got now, they would find they'd also be winning. Talking and with this is knowledge I've learned from talking to farmers. And again, it's comes down to looking at the industry and convincing people that they need to buy those good genetics because I've talked to farmers that running back to back with both Romneys and Coopworth, they're down a little bit on their fertility. But both of those guys, one of the guys didn't end up at the sale, but the other guy was at a sale buying better rams. So he'd worked out what he needs to do to improve that flock. Feet, always going to be a problem, though we're also seeing, because we're seeing a lot of grading up programs, feet from Romneys with 100 years, feet from Coopworth, which are beautiful. I saw some feet the other day, were beautiful, and the ram had no wool on them. 2 generations into shedding. But he's not going to throw all shedding lambs yet, but his feet were beautiful. So there is a lot of good things happening in the industry right now. And a big thing is, and that's where I come in, and certainly Josh, anybody who's willing to get out there and talk to breeders, that we're improving knowledge within the industry of the shedders. And we've seen a slight lift in wool. I don't see that as bad. Wool farmers need to make money. But I was talking to a breeder, and he runs both Coopworths and shedders, and he said where he struggles to grow good wool. And I've been saying this for a while. If you struggle to grow good wool, especially in that hard country, brambles, blackberries, thorns in the wool, poor colouring because of rainfall, don't grow wool. Grow a shedder. And we can be much better off. So getting that knowledge out there is going to be a big way that we can improve our industry and improve the integrity of the industry and overall do better. Right, I think that's pretty much going to be us.
Well, thank you very much, Kelvin. That's been it's been very useful. And I know you wanted to talk for a couple of hours, but we might have you back again.
Yeah, no, I do.
Yeah. No, it's been great. Just for those who don't know me, I'm Josh Lamb. I didn't grow up in sheep farming, even with my surname, but I just managed to stumble into it a few years back. Um, yeah, so I think we haven't any questions from the floor yet, but feel free if anybody wants to put in the chat anything you want to ask Kelvin. I've prepared some questions ahead of time, and you Kelvin, you just talked about shedders in general are getting more popular. That there have been a couple of setbacks, mostly with maybe some poor sheep being let into the breeding population. Do you have any figures, kind of year on year percentage increase of the shedding flock in New Zealand? And how do you see that kind of running for the next 5 years?
Yeah, so a lot of it's been anecdotal evidence on the shedders because it's very hard to get good numbers. Like even with the statistics that we get from beef and lamb on the overall population, and they do an estimate on how big the lamb crop is. When we actually kill the lamb crop, they can be 1 million sheep out. That's 5%. But in the time that I've been doing this and talking to people, the early suggestions about 4 years ago was about 7% of the population was shedding of the overall sheep population. And as I suggested, I think it's probably 9 to 11 and that 10% now, maybe in the low teens. I see an increase. We've had a setback at the moment with the wool price, but at the same time, sales of rams have been very, very strong this year. We've seen the average price lifted across most auctions. And that's the easy stuff that I can see. I can't see all the private sales. It's very hard to hide an auction that's online. I can sit there. I worked out. So Grant at Enfield just had his auction 2 days ago, and he averaged $3,827 for his rams this year, which is I think might be a bit of a record for him. So based on ram sales and full sale, and the buyers are also able to leave rams behind that aren't up to standard, which is also very, very good. So I do see a continued growth in the shedding. I don't think we're going to suddenly jump to 25%, but I see a steady increase, 15, 16% over the next 5 years, so another percent a year. There as we do fight for land use and all those other things and productivity. And farmers, we're not good at doing dollars per hour, dollars for time spent. So they look at a farming operation but don't equate it down to man hours. So I do see a steady increase, absolutely.
And just like you've touched on the challenge for finding land, and it's definitely the case here too, possibly is in the UK. Um, is there any, do you see kind of cooperations between different farmers, for winter grazing or cover crops or that sort of thing, or is it, how does
Yeah,
that work over?
we don't see that so much. There are areas in the South Island where leasing is quite common. Certainly in my area, there's no land for lease, but I'm in a dairy area. There's dairy cows, so there's a handful of sheep farmers left in the region. It's probably more than that, but we've been pushed out. The Manawatu, they're still very predominant, a lot of sheep there, and there is some leasing and agreements going on. But across platforms, we're not seeing sheep going onto dairy farms. That just isn't happening. The use of cropping land, a lot of the cropping farmers, arable type farmers, will buy their own lambs. So they'll go buy store lambs instead of allowing or leasing that ground out. So they will do a crop of winter lambs, is more common here. Yeah, much more common. And then a lot of the producers will just let the land fallow over winter. Just leave it. Especially if there's no fences suitable for sheep.
Yeah,
So,
makes sense.
yeah.
We've got a question from Tim. When are we likely to be able to access UK RAM import data on Nprove?
Yeah, I've asked that them several times before, and I don't believe it's even on their radar, actually. That was pretty much whenever you talk to the guys at Improve, and I chatted with one of the guys that has quite a big import last week. So something I didn't mention, we've got collaboration between breeders in a shedding group now in New Zealand, headed by Daniel Wheeler, Shedding Sheep Improvement Group. It's a little bit secret squirrel. I've got to be very careful what I say because they are very respectful of their members, is what I should be saying. I did some videos of rams and they're looking at sharing a ram internal group stuff. I will be able to get some footage out. So I was there talking to one of the guys and pretty much not even on the radar. So sorry, but that's at the moment. I had asked for some other stuff like having, when you go through Improve and you drop down the progeny list to see which of those progeny have progeny recorded in Improve, because I can very quickly see that there are rams in there that have been used extensively. And that's how I find the UK stuff. I just whip through and I know where they came from. And for those of you that don't know, we can import semen from the UK, but we can't send semen to the UK. We have to send the whole ram. Apparently, that's much safer. Just we put the whole sheep in the plane. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that I
And
think.
and, and another real funny one. There is a breeder here in New Zealand who is importing semen from the UK from a ram that was born in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of strangeness going on. Like just to go back to like um getting the data from rams from other countries. I think like Sheep Ireland have a Sheep Ireland are the performance recording group here in Ireland, and what they say is, well, you bring the ram in, and the data builds up over a period of time, comes in at 50% the average, and so it does take a long time to see that data filtering through. Um, like I imported a ram from Northern Ireland last year, and yeah, it just went in as kind of 50/50. So it would be nice to see some more kind of data sharing agreements so we can kind of pick out the better genetics, because there's a lot of commonalities between the different countries.
Yeah.
And
So
I
so
think it
when
would
you
probably help to advance the industry.
so when yours come here, start at the bottom,
Yeah,
start low, and that's we don't really take into account the fact the genetic merit of that animal in in its own recording system. Yeah.
cool. We'll move on. Stephen has a question. Is labor continuing to be a pinch point in the sheep industry, or are there
Yep.
youth entering into it? And if sorry, if they are entering into it, are they embracing shedding sheep, or are they sticking with wool sheep, or have you any insight onto that?
That is actually a fantastic question because um, it's a little bit of who's driving the shedding, the old guys or the young guys. What we're seeing is the average age of the New Zealand farmer just keeps getting higher and higher. We have, and it's in the 60s. I think close to 65 is our average age of our farmer here in New Zealand. So it's really struggling to get that youth in. A lot of the jobs, crutching, tailing, all those things that vaccinating, we still got to vaccinate, but all those sorts of things, drenching, it's not favoured by the young folk. But what we are seeing is we're seeing very high quality young folk entering the farming industry. They are very driven. They are probably more passion driven than monetary driven because you're not going to make huge amounts of money going into farming initially. It's a lifetime of earning to get the rewards kind of at the end. And so yeah, labor's absolutely a pinch. Very common here to see farms, they're 400-500 hectares with one house on them. And that's because it's farmed by a couple, a mum and dad team, and they don't have a young worker on that property. And interesting with the driving of the shedding, there's actually a lot of old guys, and I say that in a kind way, that go, well, I like farming sheep. I don't want to shear them. I don't want the work. I actually want to do other things. I want to enjoy life. So I can go into shedders and get another 10 years of farming. And there are guys in their 60s going, I can get another 10 or 15 years out of farming if I go to shedders. So it's quite balanced there, but there are a lot of those older farmers are saying, hey, let's get into shedders. So it's coming from both ends of the spectrum. We have a lot of generational farmers. So sometimes it's a bit hard for the older guy to go, oh, I've been running these ewes for the last 50 years on this property, and now you want to put shedders over them, but understanding that we can keep those genetics, we can keep that 50 years, put good shedding rams on, you have to buy rams anyway, and you can actually benefit from that. It takes time, but yeah, so it's a balance, both ends, and definitely a pinch on labour. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm probably on the younger end of the on sheep farmers here in Ireland, and yeah, I just want something that gets on with it. So I know some people are probably alarmed at my culling rate, but I just want something that gets on with it. I've quite a few other spinning plates, and to be honest, sheep work really well when you have a good sheep. If compared to beef or anything like that, or growing crops, they really fit in well with a lot of situations. So yeah, I find them very good. Another question from Joe here: how do you find the kill out speed of factory? So like the growth rates and finishing rates. Um, and is there a difference in performance with the different shedding breeds? Um, and
Yep.
I know you mentioned some shedding textiles. Is there performance differences between the shedding textiles, which traditionally be a terminal breed, versus some of the more maternal shedders?
As per anywhere, growth is going to come down to breeding and feeding. We've got a lot of guys here in New Zealand, and I say Romneys are very good. There are also poor Romneys, and I believe now that the best of our shedders are on par with the best of the Romneys. They may be back a little bit on some of the other traits, feet maybe, but we're also getting that sort of real quick because we've done it before. We know what to do. Um, I was talking to some people recently. They had some early born lambs. They were June born lambs, and they were hooked. They went to the works in November with 19 kilo carcasses. So, and they were. Um, he's got a stud flock. He grows animals in the hills, but there's a lot of guys taking skims off their mums. They do a skim of lambs to the works. And generally, I'm going to say 100 to 120 days, and they're getting a 19 kilo carcass, which is our average here. We've gone from a 14 kilo carcass in the 90s, and even though our sheep flock has dwindled, our ewe flock has dwindled, our output of kilos of lamb has been maintained because we've climbed from a 14 kilo carcass to a 19 kilo carcass. And I actually see, personally, I think we need to probably climb that another couple of kilos. That's another 10% output, especially if we're pinched on numbers, and we may have lost critical mass. So we need to do something to keep that up. And like anything, it depends where you are. So there are guys, Hawke's Bay, they lamb really early. They lamb July. Of course, we're 6 months different to you guys. They get big carcass weights off. Those guys are getting 25 to 30 kilo carcass weights off by Christmas. I know one guy, Hawke's Bay, and these, of course, are exceptional farmers. He lambs in September, and he's got 20 kilo carcasses before Christmas on the first skim cut. And he runs a lot of sheep.
Are they singles or twins or a mix? Or?
So that'll be your early born singles. Will be
Yeah.
coming off those out of mature ewes, and they'll be 20 kilo carcasses, September born, so they're just over 90 days.
Yeah.
And then they continue to kill, and they add a bit more weight January, February, March. A lot of these guys have got all lambs gone by April. So born August, April, and everything's gone. We do have some going through the winter, like anywhere. Some of those hard country, we've got huge elevation, like 15,000 feet sheep farms. And they can't lamb until September, October. So they will have lambs going through the winter. And there's not a lot of, there's no hogget market here. We pretty much don't have hogget. You'll get a penalty, and they come in as a sheep, as a ewe, as such. So a lot of our lambs are killed within their first year. and heading for that 19, 20 kilo carcass sort of rate.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty similar
so,
to here. Yeah, like they're capping
yeah,
generally cap around 22 kilos, sometimes up to 23, but yeah, they're
yeah.
really kind of looking for around 19, 20 kilos, I think.
There's one processor that goes into America, Atkins Ranch, and they are in the Hawke's Bay where they grow grass like crazy, and for a short time then it goes dry. And they are aiming for like a 24 kilo is what they would like. So yeah, probably very similar in there. And again, it depends on your genetics. I personally would like to see, with the fact that we don't need as many female stock now, um, hit the B mob, hit the lower class ewes with a woolly terminal, get some hybrid vigor. You're going to gain 2 kilos of growth just from the hybrid vigor. That's in that first cross is kind of what's suggested. And put more of those bottom-end lambs in the works, get them away earlier, make more money. But it's very hard for farmers, even though shedding farmers tend to be a little bit more innovative. Um, because we've seen rapid change and there's been huge demand for females, altering those farming systems fast enough and those thought patterns fast enough has been a little bit of a struggle for us. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Like there's a lot of demand for females, and the supply just isn't really there yet. And we're probably a couple of years behind New Zealand in terms of the numbers for sure. There's definitely genetics to do it here, but yeah, just a bit behind. I'm just conscious of time here. I'll probably just throw one last question in if that's okay.
I'm
Um,
fine. I'm all good. I've got all day, remember? I don't have to go to bed.
that's
I'm going to
true.
go to
That's
work.
true. Yeah.
Not like you guys, no?
Well, yeah, we'll kick it on anyway. But if there's any other questions people want to put in, do it now. Because yeah, we want to kind of keep it to the point as well.
And we can always chat on the chat group anyway. I'm around, so it's all good
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So like we'll be putting this out on YouTube probably in a few days. So if you're watching
Yep.
this in the future on YouTube, we have a WhatsApp group for EasyCare Sheep Ireland. And there's it's an international group at this stage. We've got Kelvin and a few other people from New Zealand, so that's there as well. In terms of cooperation between ram breeders and linkage, do you see much of that happening to try and kind of improve the accuracy of the data, or how is it looking at the moment?
Yes. So over the years with the wool breeders, there's been little collaboration groups formed, and they've been very good at that. They on privately, there's been quite a lot of cooperation with ram breeders in the shedding scene, and now there's the Shedding Sheep Improvement Group that's a real focus on that, to a point that are actually going to nominate a CPT, Central Progeny Group, Central Progeny Test ram. And part of the meeting that we had the other day, I think, pretty sure I can talk about, was with regard to improving linkage with the members of the shedding group. And not just encouraging using the CPT RAM, but also other RAMs that breeders around, so you get those those outside of the CPT linkage as well. And for me, I also do data. I do motorcycle data, motor car, jet boats, V8 sprint boats, car data. So understanding how that data is used behind the scenes actually helps. So there was a discussion that even within your own flock, to improve linkage within improve, was not just to use a ram in your flock in the same year, but in the same time period. So actually, if you did your AI, put out a natural mating ram at the same time, and then use that natural mating ram later on in the season, so you can use that natural mating ram to link over the time period and the growth period of those lambs born back to your AI lambs. And then a lot of guys would use a totally separate ram team for their hoggets. So they became distant within their own flock. So to link them back in, you use the same ram that you used across your ewes on your hogget, ewe lambs. Sorry, ewe lambs. I'm speaking Kiwi again. To use the same ram there to get that linkage across the flock, and then also managing to use, and this is tricky, if you bring a ram in from an outside flock and say you wanted to mate early, so you mate him early, so the other farmer can use him, but he's got no linkage if he's not got one of your rams breeding at the same time. So things like that. So yeah, and I suggested actually to build like a spider web of those linkages of animals between these shedding breeders. And there's a couple of shedding breeders that are extremely good at helping others out. Maybe not even not as data, but they will take if they're doing a little project for themselves, and there've been some projects with blackface shedding type animals, and they loan them out to other local commercial breeders so they can do little own progeny tests across those animals. A little bit anecdotal, it's a little bit of looking over a pen of lambs, and those ones have got black faces, so they're from that ram, and those ones are white, but they all look the same, so you haven't lost. Or those ones are looking good. But as a part of a testing program, that's perfectly fine behavior, So yes, absolutely. That's happening more and more right at the moment. It's fantastic.
Yeah, oh, it's great. Great to hear. We have some of that happening here too. Campbell has put in a question. What are the finished lamb prices like over in New Zealand at the moment?
Oh, they're good at the moment. Yep. We're seeing a 1 in the front with a 0. It's fantastic. And then some guys, we do these neat things. Also, clean belly, 20 cents a kilo. So, and so some shedding breeders get 20 cents a kilo for a clean belly, and they haven't had to run a handpiece to do it. So they're loving that. Predicted it's going to climb. The fear I have is we just don't have enough volume. Coming from the goat industry, they suffer from being too small. Are we going to suffer the same fate? But yeah, it's at the moment, sheep farmers are happy, and I think that's also being reflected in the ram prices at auction across both wool and shedders. Yeah, very happy.
Great. Well, I think we'll finish it there for now. And as I say, we'll probably have you back to get an update on shedding sheep in the future in New Zealand. Very much enjoyed it, and I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who hopped on the call. And as I said, we will put it on YouTube so you can catch up there as well. Have you any final comments there, William, that you'd like to say before we close out?
Yeah, I would just like to thank Kelvin for all that information, and thank you, Josh. And I'd like to thank everyone also that joined us tonight, and hopefully you'll have got some useful information and some interesting information and facts from Kelvin. I also just want to flag the fact that we're hoping to run another one of these webinars in a couple of weeks, specifically in relation to blue tongue. As everyone will know now, we have confirmed cases of blue tongue now, both north and south. And Campbell has kindly agreed to organise a speaker for us from the UK, where they're just a little bit ahead of us, having on how to deal with blue tongue. So you might like to rejoin us. We'll advertise it on the WhatsApp group, etc. So for now anyway, I'd just like to thank everyone and wish them all the best for the forthcoming lambing season in Ireland.
Fantastic.